On the second anniversary of the blast, we are disheartened that people in Lebanon still await justice, and we call for an international investigation to be initiated without delay. That's what the 6 UNS experts have said while asking the international community for action and for the United Nations Human Rights Council to launch an investigation into the deadly blasts that killed more than 200 people in the capital of Lebanon, Beirut, and impacted the lives of a far greater number. That was 2 years ago today. You're watching Daily Debrief, coming to you from the People's Dispatch studios here in New Delhi. I'm Siddhant Dani, and Lebanon is the top story today, where relatives of the blast victims have pressed for justice and accountability for 2 years now, but political pressure has stalled the investigation since December last year. I spoke to Abdul Rahman of People's Dispatch for more on this story earlier today.
Well, there are two ways to look at it. From the side of the people who are affected, more than 200 people were killed and thousands of people were injured. Billions of dollars of property was lost in that blast. And since 2020 till now, most of at least the Lebanese government, Lebanese authorities have failed to establish any accountability. People have been demonstrating on the ground about kind of for justice to find out who are the culprits and all. There has been not much development. There has been many controversies regarding the justice system in Lebanon. There were different judges who had to basically resign because of the political pressure about the investigation and so on and so forth. That is one part of it. The second part related to that is there has been an international litigation, many international litigations filed related by the victims or by the third parties in US and in other parts of the world, claiming that there are international players involved who basically brought the ammonium nitrate to Beirut port, dumped it there for some excuse or other. So these people who are involved, the companies who are involved in dumping the ammonium nitrate, for whatever reason, apparently it was destined for Mozambique and it landed in Beirut. So whoever did this need to be held accountable. So there has not been much progress apart from the fact that there is an international case now in the US courts. As far as how Lebanon is dealing with the issue, that is, as I said before, apart from the legal part, as far as the reconstruction of Beirut is concerned, given the larger economic problem which Lebanon is facing, we know that Lebanon has been through one of the worst economic crises ever faced by any country in the world. And there is political instability. The elections which happened earlier this year have failed to end in any government at this so far. It has been months and no government has been formed. And the Lebanese attempt to secure international financial support for reconstruction and development and for the economic issues in Lebanon have by and large not materialized. So given the larger economic problems which the country is facing, the tragedy of the victims of the Beirut blast have basically multiplied because the state is not there to support them as they expected it to do even after the tragedy happened. And therefore, I will say, just to conclude, that it is the situation in by and large same as it was 2 years back.
Right. With all of that, Abdul, you were on the show a couple of days ago talking about the Karish gas fields and sort of issues going on there. I suppose the crisis that Lebanon is facing economically is not unique. Several countries around the world are in a similar situation at the moment. Broadly speaking, how are the rich countries and what is referred to as the international community stepping up to kind of fill in some of these voids that exist and aid all of these struggling nations in post-pandemic recovery and overall creation of political and economic stability?
Uh, as far as Lebanon is concerned, there has been no major initiative taken by any country in the world. The French president, before his election, was very active on the Lebanese front. But ever since the election has happened, we have not seen any movement on that particular aspect. As far as IMF is concerned, of course, IMF, I think, has agreed for a loan, but the conditionality is the new government and certain quote unquote reform processes, which
Right.
we all know would only make the problems for people more complicated. It
Yeah.
would mean whatever subsidies they are getting, whatever economic aid they are getting from the state will be withdrawn or will be curtailed in a significant way. So, as far as so-called international community is concerned, the people of Lebanon are not at any there are no prior they are not at the priority at this moment. uh, uh, it seems that the US and other global powers are busy with what is basically to kind of do something against Russia, and now provoking another war, it seems, in Asia, in China,
Southeast Asia.
with China. So I don't think there is any attempt. UN has tried to, of course, as usual, has tried to bring countries on a table to kind of resolve these issues, make it more international, more participatory. But those attempts have also not resulted in any major development. Yeah.
Right. Very quickly, Lebanon has a large international community, quite a visible international community, diaspora all over the world. Does that in any manner feature in sort of the political conversation and how things are going along?
As I said before, the petition filed in Texas, in US basically, is based on the initiative of some of these people who are in different parts of the world, in Europe and in US. Apart from that, of course, it seems there is no other visible steps taken by the people who are Lebanese who are living in different parts of the world, apart from, of course, demanding international pressure on the Lebanese political system or political elite to do something. Yeah.
Thanks very much for that update, Abdul. Next up, people living with HIV have been protesting outside offices of India's National AIDS Control Organization, known as NACO, demanding the manner and method of distribution of critical antiretroviral medicines be timely and more tailored to the needs of those benefiting from the dispersal of these drugs. India is one of the few countries in the world that gives free ART medicines to close to 1.5 million people living with HIV. But patient groups are saying that shortages have impacted as many as 50,000 people or patients now. For more on this story, I spoke to Jyotsna Singh of the People's Health Movement. Jyotsna, thank you very much for joining us on Daily Debrief. It's good to have you on the show. What exactly, the Ministry of Health, India's Ministry of Health, has come out with a response saying that there is no shortage in the country. It's a pretty typical response these days to any questions that are asked. Could you tell us what the situation is on the ground and how sort of critical is it?
Okay, yeah, as you have said, this is the typical answer for everything. And as again, always government is denying its own notices and what it has, the truth. So it was in the month of May this year that the National AIDS Control Organization, which is the central government's organization which distributes and which is responsible for giving HIV medicines in the country, they issued a notice to the states, state governments, saying that they should be changing the regimen which is given to the persons living with HIV. Now, let's take a pause. It is a very big thing to say because, on the one hand, the government is saying there is no shortage. There is no reason they will ask the states to actually change the medication that is already being given to the PLHIV. It means they know that in the near future also they will not be able to procure those medicines. And when they are, by issuing this notice, they're accepting it. Then to say that there is no stock out or shortage in the country of the medicines for which so much of protest is going on in the country, it is really pathetic, to say the least. And what it does is that when government says that there is no shortage or stock out, they actually do not even come up with the resolution, or do not involve other stakeholders in figuring out how to solve the problem. It is almost a crime, because when we do not have medicines for HIV, it actually means the change in quality of life of people and even death. So what is happening at the ground is, firstly, it is not a new issue, which is also a very unfortunate part. Since 2014, so I have been reporting on this issue since 2014, and
Right.
I don't think a year passes by when we do not report, the health reporters do not report on these shortages and stockouts for the HIV medicines. So that has been happening. In 2017, actually, there were no medicines for children in the country, and they were going without their medication. And then the more recent part is, it was in 2019 that in Manipur, the patient groups actually went to the court and said, we need medicines. Are not being given medicines by the government. Again, the latest for this year is that since March, a lot of states constantly are reporting stock out and shortages. And as we speak, the list of the states which do not have second and or third line of antiretroviral medicines are Assam, Uttarakhand, Haryana, Gujarat, Punjab, Himachal Pradesh, Jharkhand, Rajasthan, Bihar, UP, Manipur, and the Union Territory of Chandigarh. So these are definitely reported, which we know about. So that is what is happening, and this has to be resolved. Now, we do not know the reason why it is happening. But what one knows definitely is that in the past 2 years, many tenders that the government had issued failed, were not successful. Therefore, government has not been able to procure. What could be the reason? Again, we would not know the reason, but one can have good speculation, knowing the history, which is that either the medicines are not being produced, or uh, the business as usual approach of the companies, that now that these medicines are not giving them enough money, and the government procurement is not giving them enough money, so they will not actually bother about India and probably export those medicines where the money is, as
Right.
PLHIV in the country continue to suffer.
Right. So it and therefore it so be a question of the government needing to change its own procurement policy with regard to these drugs, and perhaps in keeping with inflation and other such things, or whatever might be the framework in place. And many of the states you mentioned also being run by the BJP, which is ruling at the center. Is there a lack of political will then to sort of, or is constituency of 1.5 million patients not big enough to consider important?
No, absolutely. I think there is a lack of political will. Otherwise, after so many years, also we have the tendering problem. I mean, just look at this. Haryana issued the tender for the year 22-23 in the month of June. Madhya Pradesh did that in the month of May. And your year begins in the month of March. You should be doing this tendering and ensuring that you have medicines a few months before that,
Ahead
say,
of time.
and end of 2021, that should have happened. And if the tender failed by January, you do something about it. You pull up the generic industry and say that you have to give the medicines. Our tenders cannot fail. India is called the pharmacy of the world. We have been providing these medicines to the world, and our own people are suffering and not getting these medicines. Yes, there is a lack of political will.
Jyotsna, we have a little bit of time. If you can give us some real stories of how this is impacting actual patients, because like you said, it's the denial is criminal.
Yeah. So just to explain, so stock out means no medicine, shortage, which would means less medicine. When we talk about stock out, what happens is that a PLHIV has no medicine to have, right? Now, just to explain very quickly, the HIV virus works like a spring. So it's a spring is of this size, and when you give the medication, when the medicine is in the blood, the the virus, like a spring, is suppressed. As soon as the medicine goes out of the blood, it springs up. Now, when it springs up, as you know how spring works, it does not come back to original, it jumps. So this is how the virus, the HIV virus behaves. So not taking your medication even one time is is very harmful for one's health.
Problematic.
Not taking it for few days is disastrous. So
Right.
if you look at all the communication material by NACO itself or by WHO to the community, it always mentions adherence to the medicine. Like, do not delay by even 1 hour. And then we do not give them the medicine. It has bad impact. Talking about shortage. So what happens is you give medicine for less number of period to a person. So this person, I know of this case, went to AIMS and was given medication only for 10 days because there is
Right.
shortage. Usually they should be given it for 1 month to 45 days. Now, in most of the cases, because of the kind of discrimination that people HIV face at their workplaces, nobody knows that their condition.
There. Yeah.
They have
Yeah.
to take leave from office and then
Absolutely.
go and get the medicine. When they take this leave again and again, one, it has an impact on their work, but also then people start to wonder that what is
Ask
happening, why this
questions. Yeah.
person is going again and again, and this puts them in a very, very difficult situation. And if people get to know about their condition, I mean, right to privacy, they have the right to privacy. It's according by law. So
Yeah.
that is another problem. Another case of Manipur that we know of, because of the shortage of adult medicine, this person, PLHIV, has been given children's medicine. So they have to consume, instead of one tablet, up to 10 tablets,
10 tablets. Yeah.
which is a huge stress on your body, but which also brings to a much uh, a bigger issue. What will happen to children's medicine then? We
Yeah.
do not have a lot of pediatric
Stockpiles.
medication either. So if you start to give that medication to the adults, what happens to our children? We have a lot of children, and that is not a market that companies are ever interested in. In
Absolutely.
2017, when the stockout happened, it was because only Cipla was making the pediatric medicines, and it did not make it did not go for the tender ones, and there was no medicine for children. So what is happening at this time in India with regard to ARV medication is a very serious and dangerous situation, and the government has to do something and not let this happen. And the international community also should be pressurizing the Indian government.
So thank you very much, Josna, for that important update on a critical issue. And finally, voters in the US states of Kansas, Arizona, Michigan, Missouri, and Washington voted a couple of days ago in party primaries ahead of midterm general elections coming up in November of this year. The midterms will decide who controls Congress for the rest of Joe Biden's term as President of the United States. With both major parties choosing their nominees for major state and federal positions, the vote on Tuesday tested voters' attitudes a year and a half into Biden's tenure in the White House. We'll speak to Anish from People's Dispatch for more on how the primaries went and what lies in store for both the parties.
Well, it's a mixed package for the Democrats in many ways. You have different competing interests trying to vie for a place, unlike the Republican side where there's just like this one faction scoring major victories. But in Democrats, you actually have on the one hand, the president facing historic lows in approval ratings. You have to remember that is something like 38% approval, and which is one of the lowest, I think the lowest at least in this century. And that also has to do with his performance in the post-COVID reconstruction, and also in not delivering a lot of the promises, campaign promises progressive campaign promises, especially during his presidency. The other hand, we also have a certain set of foreign policy interest groups securing their victories. IPAC candidates are actually faring far better than the more progressive Jewish candidates, or for that matter, progressive Palestinians in the Democratic primaries. We've seen that across the board right now. And to add to that, but on the other hand, you also have the the democratic progressives that have always been there, that have been trailblazing or at least called trailblazing in the last few years, holding their ground. So it is not entirely that the left is going to be washed, but the liberals, the more supposedly moderate faction in the Democratic Party, are having a upper hand, which is not a great news considering the fact that the Democratic victory, in many ways, especially in the 2020 election, depended and hinged entirely on a lot of very progressive campaign promises. So there is this sort of it's a for them it's a very uncertain situation in the coming elections. Definitely.
Right. We also saw the Kansas vote on abortion emerging as a major issue actually in these primaries. Anish, how does that kind of factor in, dismal prospects on the one hand for the Democrats, but then this ray of hope in a way?
So definitely, this is exactly reinforces the point I was making, which is the fact that outright support for progressive causes will actually do well in the United States. Kansas was considered one of those deep South states, and it is the state that has actually voted, if not overwhelmingly, but a majority of them voted in favor of abortion rights and to protect abortion rights and by extension reproductive rights and women's autonomy over their own bodies. So
Absolutely.
it is not a dead cause, but the so-called moderates that are trying to say that a lot of these progressive causes are too extreme for the public just falls flat on its face when you look at the vote results. So there is definitely, if the Democratic Party pushes through the same set of progressive causes and promises that they did in the presidential elections, they might have a chance to definitely score a better result than what they're expecting right now.
And if they actually do something towards fulfilling some of those campaign pledges and promises.
At least some of the
Yeah,
promises, yeah.
something at least. All right. Moving on, of course, to the Republican side, which you brought up briefly by saying only once, or the agenda is at least clear, and that's why actually the prospects for the Democrats are quite frightening.
Exactly. In the case of Democrats, there is a lot of infight. At least if you go by the way popular perception is being created, there is the understanding that the Democrats are infighting among themselves. But on the other hand, the Republicans are also obviously do have their own factions, but they seem more consolidated at this point, especially consolidated behind the Trump campaigns. A whole lot of issues and promises and even conspiracy theories that Trump campaign has been pushing for at this moment, especially with the supposed suppression of votes that they have been trying to push for, which is their narrative, which has always been their narrative since they lost the presidential election. So there is definitely a clear case of this very pro-Trump faction, more right-wing, more very unapologetically right-wing, actually, reactionary forces taking a more prominent stage. Even though they're not sweeping, they're taking quite a prominent stage at this point. And so, for the Democrats, if they cannot consolidate their house, they cannot put their house in order. Definitely, they are going to have a formidable challenge of this because the right will be consolidated, obviously, right? If the rest of them are not going to put up a stiff competition, especially a united competition, much less, then that is going to be a problem in the coming midterms.
Thanks for that, Anish. 3 months to go then before those general elections in the United States. Right, that's all we have on this episode of Daily Debrief. Thanks very much for watching. For more details on these stories, as always, please head to our website, peoplesdispatch.org, and give us a follow on whatever social media platform you use for regular updates on the work we do. We'll be back again tomorrow. Until then, stay safe. Goodbye.